In this episode, we talk to Meg Klink, co-founder of Pretty Informed Girls. We talk about how she built that audience, tips on how to create content, how important it is for everyday people to use their voice, how to educate and mobilize people online, and how to counter the right-wing influence with truth and progressive content creation. Welcome, Meg, to our Disrupt podcast. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
You know, as good as you can be with everything happening in the world.
Good considering.
So, I would love to get to know how you went from 0 followers. You started an account just maybe 4 months ago, was it?
Yeah, 5 and some change.
5 and some change. Now you're over 100,000 followers. Pretty Informed Girls now is such an influential brand in educating young people about the politics and breaking things down very easily so that people can understand it. Can you tell me how that journey happened?
Yeah, so Jessie, for anyone who doesn't know, Jessie is my partner with me with Pretty Informed Girls. We both came to a pretty big blockade at TikTok. We were talking a lot about topics that were not popular, and they weren't able to be monetized at all, which was fine, but we were getting videos taken down left and right. So we band together right when they were coming out with that second TikTok ban, not the first one, but the second time around. And we were like, we just need to put this on Instagram because there's no hate speech on that platform. Well, there's like, they don't let you put hate speech through, which means that you can also say whatever you want political wise, which is great and also very bad, but it lets us start our platform. I come from a digital strategist background, so I basically was like, we're just going to take everything we do on TikTok and replicate it because Instagram sees is rewarding video format and information people need on Instagram. It was always so far behind. If you remember, like Reels used to be like weeks behind what they were on TikTok. So we just started jamming the algorithm every day with news and videos and satire. And eventually it just started working pretty fast. And that's kind of how it came about.
So you're a digital content creator, a progressive creator, but what got you first? Take me back to what was your interest in politics? How did you find yourself getting involved?
I think at a very young age, I knew who I was. I was pretty active in LGBTQ rights, like at a very early age. And then I ended up moving into high school as part of our Young Dems. I grew up in a red county right around DC, and it wasn't very popular to have progressive or, quite frankly, at all Democratic opinions. And Bernie Sanders, which is why I was really excited to see him this weekend, was kind of the first person that really propelled me into this. And I had a really incredible teacher. Her name was Snowy. She actually just passed. So I do just want to talk about her and bring her in here because I think I owe a lot of my politics and ability to speak on that to her. And I have really a great politically savvy mother. And I think that kind of just gave me the foundations for always wanting to fight for human rights. I struggled a little bit in college to find that footing. I went to a really small school. I did other activities. And then once 2020 hit again, I knew that that was like something that was critical to who I was. So I changed kind of my entire direction of life and seeing things into talking about policy, but in a very non-complete way. Like I would kind of make videos here and there. I would always share things to my stories until February this year. And that was when I started really hammering it because we just can't live like this without talking about it.
So something just clicked.
So like truly, I think for me was when I realized that my friends didn't want to talk about things because they were so overwhelmed and I didn't know. They wanted to talk to me about them and they were getting their news from me because I was the only one internalizing everything, but I didn't know how to explain it online without it sounding like I was repeating the news or just how to get things early and on time. And then I ended up kind of really sewing my way into the activist space, which a lot of content creators also double as activists, which is incredible. So I've kind of made this network, and that allowed me to like really propel into doing multiple fields of activism online, which is a very convoluted and different space.
When you were growing up as a kid, did you ever think that you would be at all involved in like the digital media space? Was that something that you always thought you could see yourself in?
Yes, for sure. I always knew that I wanted to be online or somehow known. I was just very confused as to what that would be for. And I always had like a very loud voice. I just didn't know what that belonged to yet. Um, and I think it took really until this last year. Like I knew I was savvy in what I was talking about, but I didn't know it would actually impact people. And now I know that it does help people when I speak about it.
And I know that you know you were a soccer player
I
in
was.
high school and college. How did being an athlete, and so how does that in any way relate, or do you feel things that you learned being an athlete helps you now when you're online and you're having to create so many things?
Yeah. I think for me, like the biggest thing was I was I went through like a lot of rough patches in college mentally, and I didn't have the mental fortitude I think in sports that other people had in sports, and I didn't see that as my space to persevere, and I always felt like I was lacking in that way, but it's just because that's not where I wanted to persevere. And now I know like certain topics, like when I talk about politics and human rights, I can like wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning and get dressed. Like I hated. I was like, I don't want to get up for lifts at 4 in the morning. This
Conditioning
is so
sucked.
dumb. Like I don't want to do that. This I will, and I know that I want to do that.
Well,
It's
it's
a little
yeah.
different, but
Yeah, I playing soccer. I mean, when I was also in high school and in college. Yeah, it's interesting that even if you have like a specific talent at a certain age, sometimes you feel like not as free and not as motivated sometimes in what you feel you could achieve. So I want to learn a little bit more of like, so you have this moment that things like really click, you start creating the content. When did this start becoming more than just like kind of like a side project, and you starting to realize, all right, this is something like big and it's impacting people, and you're having followers and you're having influence. So take me through, how did that realization start?
so the realization's still happening. Still
Okay,
happening.
we're in the process.
I explain it. I referenced this to Jesse the other day. I was like, when I had my puppy, it was like looking at him for 6 months, he looked the same size to me. And then I would look at pictures of him and he was so massive. And I was like, wait, you are not, well, you don't look like you're growing, but you're huge when I'm looking at pictures of you. That's how it feels right now. Like still kind of feel like we're inching and that we're not really making an impact. And then I remember when I was so excited to get 2 followers and then so excited to get like 10, I was like, oh my God, we reached 100 followers today. This is incredible. And now it's like just propelled. And I think the stories that people tell us and thanking us is how I'm realizing how impactful it is. I have a lot of, we have a massive Gen X following, which I think a lot of people don't know. It's actually 20% of our demographic. We have a lot of moms, a lot of people who are divorced, who talk about the fact that they have no family, no friends that agree with them politically now. They might have been a dual party household, which dual party does not constitute to MAGA and Democrat. Those are two very different things than what they were in the early 2000s. So a lot of people are feeling very alone, and they're like, you are who we have to look at or to chat with, or people in your kind of network. So that I think is where I'm feeling like it is genuinely starting to make a difference in my mind.
They find refuge in your content.
Yeah. Yeah.
And also, I think people struggle with talking about their values, especially in these moments when you're seeing things that you just know in the core of your heart that is so wrong. But and you have people that, and it could be family, it could be friends, that like to play this devil's advocate, or like to provoke, and people feel like they don't know how to talk about these issues. So the educational component of the work that you're all doing, I think is critical.
Yeah. I think for us, the biggest part is making it not some things I was just talking before this about. Sometimes I don't understand legal things. And so I go to my friend who is a lawyer and I let her digest it to me first. And I think a lot of people just aren't able to understand things that they just have not ever read about, or they're not able to intake all day long. which is why I do what I do. So I can take it in for them and then break it down. And we don't need to know everything that the media is throwing at us. I just try to grab the most powerful things that I think we can enact. And I think the Democratic Party has lost a lot of people because of this, like, being really elitist in a way and not being able to break down information. So breaking information down in a way that people can actually understand it is so critical with messaging.
And something that I find really compelling about your content is that it doesn't feel like I'm being lectured by a college professor. It feels like you're just, you're my friend and you're telling me, breaking down the news.
Yeah.
And it seems easy, but take me through that process a little more, because if you say something that maybe isn't 100% accurate, or even how do you overcome that fear of, like, if you're not an expert in a field, and not only are we in the age of so much misinformation but so much online hate, how do you, like, mentally prepare for that? How do you prepare in terms of how does your day-to-day go, because you put so many videos out? It's impressive. How do you do it?
So I think one of my most important credos to myself is, like, I always try to take advice from people. There's a difference between criticism that is, maybe like right-wing people telling me that I'm crazy. That's different than someone genuinely being of concern that something I reported and saying, like, hey, I think that this could have been done a different way, and here's how I would have liked to perceive this. That's always important, and I always want to see that. And I always read our DMs. All my followers know I try to get to all of our DMs because it's really important that we're constantly shaping our content to be better. And at the end of the day, what our content revolves around is activism, not news. And everything we report is usually something that we have already studied, we're already aware of, and that we want to have action items attached to that. Sometimes I'm not intelligible, like, I don't understand a topic because it's not known to me. I will not report on it, or I will say, hey guys, I will report on this later. Please see my friend X who has already talked about this and they're educated on it, and then I will read about it and report on it later. But I don't ever report on something that I don't know what it is, because I think that's one way of at least keeping a barrier of just parroting and trying to keep the spread of potential misinformation.
And with the Trump administration just flooding the zone, as they call it, and
Yeah.
it's the truth, and it's like you're drinking from a hose. How are you, able to pick apart, right? What are the topics that you want to talk about, and feel like you're not missing something super important, while at the same time, almost everything the Trump administration is so dangerous and so important for people to get out. So how do you make those calculations, and how are you able to just deal with 10 things coming at you in the morning when you wake up and there's like 10 pieces of news?
So at the end of the day, something really important to remember is that they're all interconnected, and speaking out on what's happening, no matter what it is going to lead you to the next piece of that puzzle. So if we're talking about the Big Beautiful Bill, which is how I gained a lot of my followers, was staying up and being really, I read that bill. And
You read the whole bill?
I read the bill. I was temporarily unemployed, and I had nothing better to do. I really wanted to read it, and I didn't understand a lot of the legal parts of it. So that was a lot of what I did in that time for a few weeks, was just like really dissecting what the legalese was in bills. And it's something that I've been working on for like the last few months. And, knowing that parts of that bill that we were talking about, like housing and talking about Medicaid and Medicare, those were huge components of it. But also, so were Pell Grants, and so were immigration policies. There was a lot of things tied into that. So fighting against the administration or fighting for liberation of groups of people, if you can't speak to them all, speaking to one is helping those others. Like, they're all connected by chains. If you, like, think of that, like, think of those, like, remember in class they used to have, like, those little paper things you would, like, link together?
Yes.
It's like if you have one after the other, like, they do start to go together.
So don't let perfection be the enemy of progress. If you can't talk about all the
Yes.
topics, you try to see like the ones that you can and really would deliver that information. Now, I mean, congratulations really for reaching over 100,000 followers. I mean, that is a huge milestone, and it comes with a lot of responsibility, but also a lot of like knowledge that many people would like to know. Maybe there are
Yeah.
people who either are an expert in a certain topic, or just, like you, or many people want to be an activist, want to help educate people, educate the communities. How was that process from 0 followers to 100,000? Or like, how was that follower from 0 to 10,000?
Yeah.
Like, if you were to kind of like walk us through how that process was and how you achieved that with your content.
So part of what I always do, and I think is critical for anyone who is either creating content for work or creating it like as a career or creating it for themselves, is constantly knowing what the algorithm is up to. It's always different, it's always shaping, and it's truly every day something new comes out on your preferred platform. Meta, unfortunately, there's really not a great platform to work on ethically. Meta is my preferred content platform. So I'm always up to date with what's happening in the algorithm. Knowing how to hack it is one of the most important things. So knowing if you're putting out one video a day, if you want to be a content creator, like that's probably not going to work if you're polishing everything a lot. What's important is making content and getting it out to people. And we have this idea, which I even tell like clients and like people I work with, it's having really polished like 4K videos all the time and making sure that you get out everything perfect isn't a reality when it comes to A, activism, and B, news. It's just not unless you have these giant teams of people, which like I'm not a major media outlet and no content creator is. So learning to just take the content that you want and get it out there confidently if you have a message. And I think more experts should be creating content. I mentioned earlier my friend Rachel is a lawyer, and if you guys don't know Rachel Cohen, she's incredible. And it's so critical. Her content to me is everything because I genuinely just, who knows about the law? Like, unless you're a lawyer. That's not your expertise. So having people who are experts explaining things in educational ways that are digestible is so needed right now because education is not accessible, period, to Americans.
So what if someone tells you, I I'm very smart and knowledgeable about, let's say, transportation, and I've been trying to make videos around transportation. I would talk in front of the camera, and I'm just not getting many views. But it's very important to that person. And how, like, are there three like quick tips that you would give someone who is like starting out? Maybe they've already have a few followers, or maybe have none. What are three quick things to get someone started if they want to be able to create content?
Right. Keep really consistent branding, whether it be like for us, my breaking news is always pink. It says breaking news in pink, and then whatever it is underneath the headline is in black and white. So everything should always be like very consistent. Make sure that you have hashtags. I know I'm partial to hashtags, and I'll say it here. You've heard it here. Always have a consistent hashtag that you use, whether it be like three. You'll always see us say U.S. news, pretty informed girls, breaking news. That is usually consistent across our videos.
So the hashtags don't have to, because I think sometimes even I find myself being like, oh, do you have to do a trending hashtag? So
But a mix.
a
Yeah,
mix?
a mix. So, and forever it'll be the debate of whether they're useful or not. I believe they are, and that's just my 2 cents. I happen to be okay at it, so I'm gonna say that I'm not on the wrong path. But I always use a consistent one, something that might be localized to the topic. So if we're talking about another country or we're talking about Europe, like I might say EU news or world news, to add that in there, and then something relative to the topic. I also try and get a couple things that are maybe the antithesis of what you're trying to talk about. So if I'm trying to talk about Trump, I'm trying to talk about the big beautiful bill, I'm going to hashtag Trump because I do also want engagement on it, and I want people to see it who might not agree with me, because that's what we're trying to do. Is we're trying to give people a new perspective, and we want that reach.
That's
Was that
really,
two?
those are, I think that was two, yeah.
Okay, three, I think the last most important thing is always stay on top of your notifications. People feel really respected and they feel like you're engaging with them when you're answering their messages, when you're liking their comments. If you're talking about economics, go to different economics influencers or different economic posts, type in hashtag economics, go through those posts and like them, see who else is liking them, see who's commenting, follow them. Like, engage with the communities that you're trying to like hack into.
So it's really finding a community, just like if you were to be an
Yeah.
activist in person, you
Yep.
want to find the group, you want to find the community that's also online, applies online.
And that's true for anyone in digital strategy. So that's
Okay.
the life hack for marketing.
All right, so you heard it here. If you want to start, these are some tips to get you started. So, how would you say? Because I'm very fascinated by the brand of Pretty Informed Girls, also known as Pig.
Pig.
So,
Yeah.
what was the inspiration for that name specifically, and how does your political account set yourself out differently from other accounts?
Yeah. So for the name, I think the first thing that we try to go to is anything that could be interpreted in multiple ways. It's kind of our bread and butter. We talk about controversial topics. Pretty Informed is obviously kind of falls in two different realms. It could be pretty, comma, informed, pretty and informed. It could also be we're pretty informed. Any way you choose, it says interpret the name as you wish. Grammatically, there's obviously a correct way to look at it, but who knows what a comma is. So that's kind of how we landed there. I think there serves a purpose. It's kind of like you can be beautiful and smart and funny. Like you can have multiple things that tie into your identity. And I think a lot of women try to repress that or squash part of them down so they don't seem like they're more intelligent or they don't like one of those things gives. Especially in politics, it's also really hard to, you want to look masculine, like you want to have a short haircut. Like that's just not true. You don't need those things. We have a voice as women and we shouldn't be making ourselves to be more like men, to be smart and incredible. We don't need that branding. And I think it's really important to remind people that women are important as women, or whatever your voice is important as who you are.
And that's especially important in the rise of this just extreme far right,
Yeah.
extremely sexist and just race. And it's just like, it's not even, I don't know if you can call it racist anymore. It's like straight up Nazi propaganda that you're seeing, and it's being normalized. And there seems to be, and of course, there's the whole narrative of the Joe Rogan of the left, and this whole since the election, right? It's like, how do you respond? Do we just need to counter the same, do the same thing, but on the left side? So
No. No, I'll answer that right now. The reason why the left is such a robust and difficult political party is because there is no cohesive branding, which is hard, and also because we all believe different things. The right molds to this identity of whatever's being said, and we even see it in congressional levels of officials saying, like, we're just going to do whatever Trump says, period. We don't care. Whatever he says is how we're doing it. When the left has very moderate Dems, you have liberal people, you have democratic socialists, you have far left people, no one really listens to the same person, reads the same things. What makes it so different is that we're all an incredibly different group of people with different opinions, and that is what's so special about and important to activism and to progressive policy.
And I think that is something that the right wing, they try to say that the left or Democrats are sheep, but I think it is more of a sheep if you just follow the leader and don't question it. And it's interesting because I think that's how the Democrats or the left kind of there's the whole idea of the circular firing squad, but it is important to have diversity of an opinion. There has been a very conservative attack by the right wing against saying that we're against freedom of speech and that we all believe the same thing, but now we're seeing that on the right, it's almost like very uniform. And it is sometimes both our difficulty and our strength. You're right, that there's such a diversity of opinion. And we're seeing online. So how do you navigate, because of how diverse, being a Democrat, being on the progressive side of things there's also a lot of strong opinions over every single little thing, every single phrase or words. Sometimes online, people misinterpret. So how do you, what are the challenges in terms of criticisms, overcoming that, and how do you view being a creator in navigating that environment?
So I'm currently working on navigating it. It's a very weird space. It's not really like a usual content creation gig where most hate might come from aesthetics or might come from something you're doing that's kind of, it's so easy for me to ignore people talking about my looks. I'm a Leo. And I'm like, no, I'm just not listening to that. It's really hard when I feel like my own team is attacking me, but I also know it's important to keep in multiple perspectives and hold space for multiple perspectives, which is why I always am reading comments and reading through stuff, which is what makes it incredibly difficult. I think it's really important for people to remember that you have to have a checks and balance system, and we have to be able to critique politicians. And if you are not willing to hold space for critique, it's probably not the job for you. And that's really, and that falls for everything under the political spectrum and being an influencer. Like, you're incredibly online. We're incredibly online, and that's not going to go away. And the bigger you grow, the worse that gets. So if you know, I think about it all the time. I'm like, can I handle this? Maybe, maybe not. But what's more important to me is speaking out to people who I know need that voice and need guidance, and it overcomes it for now.
Is this like is this your full-time gig? Like, is this something? No. So what do you do outside of? Oh, first of all, pretty simple. You do something else other than like I see you every day. This must be so much work. So you actually have like a full-time job outside of this.
Yeah, so I work for a nonprofit in the daytime. I work 9 to 5, and it is really nice to keep a balance between and just like a little bit of a wedge between what's going on and having some sort of like actual structure. I do thrive in structure. I don't love it, but I know that I need it. So that is great. And what I do at work does directly tie into so many things that are going on in the world right now. So I am very proud to know that what I speak about outside and what I advocate for directly impacts our mission, and everything, like I said, everything is connected. So activism outside of work does always somehow seem to tie back into work, even in little small ways. And just being really informed is incredibly helpful when you're working in the world of, working with governments, working with states. Like, it's very helpful. I try to get up in the morning and debrief everything that's going on. I have a lot more access to information now than I did when I started, which is great. I have some really great friends in the space who can also, if we're struggling, we can kind of balance each other and say, hey, maybe this wasn't important today, or I'll cover this, you can cover that, and we can direct each other, we'll cover it. But the evening is when I really try to just work. When I get home, I try to shower, sit in bed, and get everything done from 6 o'clock to whenever it might. I mean, some days there are things happening until 1 in the morning. Wow. And it's not a sustainable model for now, but it's what's working. Wow. I don't think it's sustainable, frankly, but we'll, figure that out.
I mean, and the hours that you work on the account. I mean, that's basically like a full-time. So you do your full-time job 9 to 5, and then you just keep working. Do you have time? Do you have time for anything else?
So I have said this before, and my followers know to hold me accountable to it. I try to take off Saturday or Sunday. I find Sunday to be actually a pretty active news day nowadays, because they try to do sly things and sneak things in on the weekends now. But I try to take Saturday. I love to let my phone die, and I spend times with friends. And if something critical happens, I'll know from their phones, and they can and they can tell me to turn my phone on. But I try to just like really unplug for a little bit, and that gives me a reset.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like not the space for everyone. That is for sure.
So letting your phone die. That's the
letting your phone die.
Okay, that's
Let it die.
That's a great pointer to have, because I mean our phones, even if you're not a content creator, even if you're not an activist, your phone is constantly blowing up, and it's so hard to concentrate on life and try to live in the moment. And knowing that that's your strategy to try to live in the moment, because it must be so hard to be able to just ground yourself, and I'm sure your friends are probably like so important to just be able to hang out with them in order to keep sanity in this news world. And not only are you consuming, but then you're having to show the world and educate the world on that news.
Yeah, something I think, and which is good advice for I think everyone right now and everyone in general, is having really clear boundaries with people you love and being really upfront with them with what's happening. I think, especially since November, there's been this like kind of looming dark cloud over so many Americans and so many people across the world. And a lot of people are going through really tumultuous changes within their ideology, within things that are happening in the world, and are feeling just like the weight of what's happening in the US, what's going on with Trump, watching a live stream genocide. Like these things are incredibly heavy, and letting people know where you stand is really important. So like I will text my friends, or I might put on like a private story and say, "Hey guys, I'm like not great this week and I need space from everyone. I will text you back on Monday, or I'll get back to you, or double text me if it's important." Letting everyone know that you also need space, or just being in communication with them is really important, because I think it's a stressful time for so many people and we forget that we're all going through something.
Yeah, and it can be, especially when you, and this is for anyone who becomes an expert in something, or people rely on them for whatever it is, and you get overwhelmed. Having Being communicating is key, and it's not always easy.
It's not. And it's like, I used to be very afraid to tell my friends, and I am so bad at saying no. It's like actually the worst thing ever. But learning to say no and learning to like actually have boundaries for yourself is so important, especially when you're an adult and it doesn't even matter. You don't even need a reason. You don't need a reason to tell someone that you can't do something. So, Pretty Informed Girls, we started back in, it was like literally the last day of March, I think. We started it as kind of like a safe haven when TikTok was potentially going out for the second time. And we were being really, we were being shadow banned, and we were having videos taken down and getting violations for talking about a slew of topics regarding human rights. And it just wasn't working on TikTok. We still have them, but it's not very it's not how we get out a lot of information. And a lot of our audience, there just wasn't a lot of people on Instagram that were talking about what needed to be done. And the big beautiful bill was like a major topic that I was taking in, and the best way to get it out was via Instagram, because there was just a little less noise than there was on TikTok. With you can search things a little easier, and the algorithm there.
I first saw your account when you were interviewing Justin Brannan,
Yes.
council member from Bay Ridge, who was running for comptroller to be the city's bulldog. And he ran a campaign where he was a punk rocker. He was really not the typical politician. And I remember,
CBGB punk rocker.
yeah, see, exactly. And he, he's got such a great personality for this like digital format. And I saw you interviewing him. And you remember how we first met, when I saw the video, was like, what, the night before election day?
Yeah.
And I just like DM'd you, and I'm like, she's never going to answer. But it was like to try to do content on election day. And you answered.
By the way, guys, I always try to answer our DMs. That's usually how I function. That's actually still how I function, and I feel like then I had like 35,000 followers, maybe like 40,000
I
followers.
think you were at like almost 50.
We were like getting close to 50.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which was that was June. That was not that
Yeah,
long
it was
ago.
June. And still to this day, if you text me the night before, I'll probably do something in the morning. I have the inability to say no, which like I say all the time. But yeah, and like politics functions that way. I think it's really important that we're all constantly, yeah, I'm like, it's important that we're all constantly on our phones and online. Please don't be. But for our world, we really are always constantly on our phones and checking things, because I report the news. So.
And you report it in a way that makes people who are either in politics, like myself, or people who are not really into politics and they don't know much, just be able to understand these basic things. So what was the inspiration to start Pretty Informed Girls? How did you always think you were going to be a digital storyteller? Like, how did you get into it like this?
I've always been internet adjacent, or like somehow on the internet. And I work as a digital strategist, creator, and a marketing director. I've been like kind of all over the place in the marketing world. Jesse and I were mutuals for maybe like 6 months before we started Pretty Informed Girls. And we both were feeling that we were getting like our voices are being suppressed, and our voices are really representative of the people we were trying to speak about. We were like, there has to be a way that we can get this information that's so critical out to the public. And luckily, we found a platform that more or less lets us do that. And, we both have two different styles. I usually report breaking news and then might talk a little more in depth about certain topics. She does a similar thing to the latter part of that. She also goes into topics, talks about commentary, and then she has a satire wing, which is really important. I think it gives people like a breath of fresh air sometimes. When they see my face, I try to make sure it's digestible, but doesn't feel like the world's ending when they see me. I don't want people to have like a visceral reaction to seeing my face. I don't want them to go, oh God, she's here and she's about to deliver like the worst news ever. So we try to keep it like really mixed and put other topics in there as well as our activism, because I just don't think people can take it all at once. And that's what I noticed my friends had that problem with. I was bringing conversations up the dinner table and they were like, okay, we need to like chunk these topics and talk about them in different ways. And so that was kind of like a trial run. For I was like, okay, I'm the one reporting the news to my friends, and now this is how I'm going to report it to other people in that same way.
And what drives you in terms of wanting to make an impact in social justice? And you could be using your skills, purely for non-political reasons. What makes you want to use your voice and your platform to try and enact change? Because educating people is a critical step to creating any sort of change.
Yeah, activism has always been very important to me. And my mom is a teacher, and I always say I never want to be a teacher. But
My mom's a teacher too.
really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. I think she came to it later, and she had a career before she got there and teaches what that career was. I think that's where I find myself a little more, as I like to educate, and I've always been very interested in topics and knowledgeable. I just would like blab about them. So writing wasn't really my strong suit, and I was like, I don't want to teach. Like that's not really what it is for me. But being able to put it in these like informational videos is a much better way of directing information, and you're still teaching people, you're just informing. So it's all kind of it's a similar thing.
Yeah.
And something that she's always been really passionate about is accessibility and making sure that people, she used to run a nonprofit that was actually like a restaurant that hired people with disabilities and, single moms. And that was something that I was seeing from age 7 on. And that was my life. And I knew that that was critical to my mission and my life and like what I hold space for. And I didn't know how to create that in my professional life, and I never felt right. I didn't want to work in politics. From the DMV, everyone's in politics. It's like I couldn't do it. This is like finally how my voice translates, is still being able to have my personality, have tattoos on my arms and be who I am, but still educate on topics that are really important. And I think our generation specifically needs people who aren't really buttoned up and who aren't coming at you with this like super elitist academic form of saying, you don't know this and you should know this. It's more like, hey, you don't know this, that's okay, let's talk about it. Which is how we need to be approaching educating voters and educating Americans on really difficult topics.
Authenticity is the greatest currency right now in politics and online, which is interesting because online you're, not interacting with someone in person, yet people feeling authentic is what makes or break an audience for someone, right? And what
Yeah.
can build one. And what I observe from your content is you're very yourself, and something I find very entertaining and also very kind of like relatable is that not only do you put your content out when you're educating things, but just about I see, your life, how you're feeling in that moment, the text post, and it's like, okay, this is just, a friend of mine who also is teaching me so that I can understand all the craziness. And I think even as someone who is working in politics, you need someone who can break things down easily, and also people who feel helpless right
Yeah.
now. There's so many young people. We're seeing what's happening to things that we thought would not
Ever
we wouldn't
happen
see
again.
ever happen again. Something that we only read in history books,
Yeah.
and we're seeing it, and it's so hard to feel how to feel about it and what to do. So how do you view the work that you're doing through educating, but and also how that mobilizes and creates change, and how does just digital storytelling and content creation achieve those ends?
Yeah. So I've seen a lot of people. I've seen a lot of different thoughts about online activism or online content creation. And I think something that's really determinant for me is knowing that everything has a call to action, or everything has a meaning of what we're doing behind it, and we're not just reporting something flat to like tell people. That's not what I'm for. Like that's what like CNN and like other major media outlets are for. I'm not here to do that. Everything is, hey, this horrible, horrible thing is happening, and I'm not going to minimize that. But here's what we can do, and here's what you can do to help. And we have a lot of people in, people in Canada, people in the UK who are like, what can I do? I'm like, great. You can actually tell your elected officials to pressure our elected officials. And people in Big Beautiful Bill was a great example of people feeling very ostracized, especially like, okay, well, my senator's a Democrat, so what do I do? Leave comments on social media posts. We've all resorted to the call your senator, email your senator, whatever, call your member of Congress. They have social media too. And the Big Beautiful Bill, they all turned off, all the Republicans were turning off their comments because we were blowing up like literally their social media comments were like, do not vote on this bill, do not vote on this bill. There are so many ways to aggravate and to pressure these people that are just new and really unthought of. So you just have to make sure that like while we're putting out information, we're also having really constructive and clear action items for people so they don't feel like information's getting thrown at them and there's nothing they can do with it.
That's really, I think a lot of elected officials are trying to react and keep up with the new digital sphere, because you're right. Like before, maybe calling your representative or showing up at a protest is one way. And I still think that it's important. Like physical activism is critical, but there is power in numbers online when you care about an issue. What's interesting is also as politicians are trying to, many electives are trying to adapt to this like short form video, and we're seeing
Not
we're
well.
seeing many people try to emulate and copy Zohran, and it's not.
Andrew Cuomo
Well, yes.
and Eric Adams.
And they're both trying. They're both really
Yeah.
trying. Why do you think you look at their videos, their views, and it has just very few compared to Zohran? Why is it that it's not just enough? Do you think to just have the strategy, the short form strategy content for videos and just making it look good?
Yeah. So you either kind of like have the sauce or you don't. And you can hire like people always talk about the Obama era and how much that literally got people off their couches who had never voted before. And with Soran, he had this incredibly clear messaging. And he actually had someone on his team that we actually learned about at the rally that he came up with the buses fast and free. And he packaged everything so well, but he also meant every word he said. And he means every word he says. And when you see him speak, he is genuine and he goes out and talks to people. We had Working Families Party had a rally for his, in his primaries, and there was something going on outside. He went outside and shook every person's hand and asked them what was going on, asked them how he could fix their issues. He doesn't eliminate any type of voter. He looks as Trump voters. He looks as Andrew Cuomo voters. He looks at Eric Adams voters. Those are all people that could vote for him. And it's not just about voting for him. It's about making sure they know what he wants to change in the city and how they probably want that too. They just don't know it. And there's a lot of like propaganda around the word socialism. And that's very hard for people to internalize without knowing. Like, they really do believe that we probably should have rent stabilized housing. They just don't know it. So having that like real just like charisma and believing in your digital team is so important. A lot of people, a lot of like people in Congress do not believe in media and in this new media in the same way, and it's harming them. So trusting that the young people that are going to work for you are going to change what you're doing and they are really going to push it to the next line is what's important. And Zoran's really good at putting trust in his team.
Yeah, and people could feel that
They
online.
can feel it.
The
Yeah.
the lack of authenticity or actual authenticity.
Of everything.
Everything.
Yeah.
So you're disrupting through digital storytelling and content creation. How do you see using content to disrupt Trump's authoritarian government right now and what he is doing, using this digital sphere that has a lot of power of help mobilizing people, but there's also a lot of misinformation and propaganda from the right in that ecosystem. So how do you view a way of using your platform, digital content creation, as a tool to fight against authoritarianism?
Yeah. It is for sure like a bit of a minefield, and you never know what you're gonna get. And people will always twist what you say, and there's like truly always a chance that I could say this is black, and someone will say no, it's not, it's white, and that is just the reality of being on the internet. And there's a lack of nuance in the internet as well, which is interesting. Um, I think for people, they just need to feel like there's someone else that believes in what they believe in. And I know I mentioned this before to you, like I have a lot of followers who just are really alone, and not just my followers, but other creators who also are, activists or who are progressive creators. They just don't have a community to talk to. And they need to know that there's someone who believes in what they believe in. Like, we have people who are in towns that have their family doesn't believe in what they believe in, their friends don't believe in what they believe in. And you kind of gaslight yourself into thinking that you're wrong. And now they're coming online and saying, hold on, there's like millions of people that believe in what I believe in. Or you feel hopeless. And every time someone feels hopeless, I'm like, that's incredibly valid. Yes, and remember, there are hundreds of millions of Americans and millions of people worldwide who are ready to fight with us and who also are against this. And it's truly like volume and numbers. Like you have strength in these numbers. You just might not see it every day, but they're there.
And hopelessness is the worst thing
Yeah.
right now, and that's what the far right and the Trump administration wants. They want us to feel hopeless. And what you said about about making sure people know that they're not alone and connecting people. I mean, community is critical to making people feel empowered,
Yes.
that they can make an impact and they don't just have to sit back and think that there's no way that things can be changed. What was also interesting about making people feel not alone is the role that it can also play in physically bringing people into
Yes.
spaces, and that's what the Zoran campaign did very well. Is that people went from being very energized, like, excited online, and then going to a canvas. And where Zoran, I think he
Totally.
mentioned he had 50,000 volunteers.
Yeah.
Obviously, a huge part of that was because of this content. How do you view that role of online bringing people, offline, to also be able to be part of these communities and engage in running for office, engage in going to their local
Yeah.
civic organization?
That's a really good question. And something I always try to remind people like the most important thing right now is community and is finding community around you. And I think we have this like really awful habit of thinking that we have to do something nationally. And we always think so big. We're like, okay, well, I can't change this law, or I can't change this Supreme Court decision. And you feel just like bogged down. And that is a system they're building it that way on purpose. They are trying to just like pummel you with information and with one thing after another to break you down. A lot of people forget that you can just walk out of your door and say hi to your neighbor. Yeah. And you can go meet people. And it's tough. And in this day and age, our generations are a little different. We're a little more hesitant to just like go up and talk to people. Although in New York, like I say in big cities, it's so much easier because you can go to a coffee shop and sit at the person next to you and say, hey, are you voting next week? Well, who are you voting for? Why? What are your interests? And it's in a place like this, it is crucial that you build community. And in a time where we have neighbors and friends and families and coworkers being literally kidnapped or discriminated against, um, it's so important that we're building that in immediate community. And joining an organization, like I know you were in Brooklyn Young Dems, like joining an organization near you in local politics is so important. We have this mindset of like, oh, the general elections and 4 years from now, we're hopeless. There are so many positions that are held by so many incredible people locally, right? You have like your city, you have your city council, and you have these representatives in your district, and then you have your state, and then you have like, there are so many little things you can do. And if you can't go to a protest, that's okay. Like, bring water, give water to your friends who are going to a protest. If you're not able bodied, like, maybe do something, maybe share an infographic online. And if you think you can't go because it might be in harm to yourself, like, find out what is really that you're really good at and then replicate that in your
I
activism.
think that's a very great point. Find something you're good at
Yeah.
or something that you like to do.
Like, absolutely.
Because you're right, not everyone has to do everything, and it shouldn't be the only way to make an impact is running for office. That's absolutely a way. But you're right. You could be, if you are an expert in a topic that you really want to talk about. I mean, right now we have experts, you have doctors that they're trying to create content to let people know that what's going on is wrong and here's
Hey,
why.
take a vaccine, please.
Yes,
Like,
which is now a huge danger. So what do you see right now? Because this speaks to also the other part is the ecosystem right now. I mean, the right wing ecosystem dominates and has been dominating, and um, creating that counter of community, as you had said, is crucial for us to be able to push and be able to educate people on the truth, because the truth is under attack. How do you view Pretty Informed Girls' role in countering those narratives and in providing that space? Because ultimately, and that's unfortunately, that what is true and what is not true is no longer what sets the tone. It's who can yell louder.
right. First thing I want to note is that I always remind people that just because something is the law or just because something is what's happening doesn't mean it's morally right. And I think a lot of people are struggling right now with like, or thinking that it won't happen because it is illegal. And that is a very common problem we have. It's like, okay, well, Trump can't do that because Congress needs approval, like, has to approve that. Sure, theoretically, that's how the government works. This is a authoritarian government, fascist, like, we're dealing with fascism. We're in it. They're not following the rules by the rule books, and we can slap injunctions on them and hope that that works. But like today, great example, like someone said, "Hey, you can't. The ICE raids are illegal in LA," and then they just went right back, and the Supreme Court said, "Actually, no, they're not." Like,
Racially profiling is now an acceptable
Form.
thing when it comes to identifying people. It's
and that's not in any part of any law we have solid ground. But these people truly believe that they can do whatever they want, and they will try to do whatever they want. So reminding people that we have to activate no matter what it is that you want to activate on. Like, you can't, this echo chamber of information is really insufferable and hard, especially when the right is like just coming at us all the time. But know, like, that you are 100% valid in concerns. And I think sometimes when online we have the tendency to like gaslight ourselves and say like, oh, well, actually, I don't know, like, maybe that's not, like, no, it is that bad and it really is happening, and you really have to act against it.
and how do you do it in a way that doesn't also make people feel like, oh, this is they're exaggerating or they're nerds? Because that's where the right wing has pushed a very strong narrative that we're not cool.
Totally.
Which is why I like
We're
also
super cool, by
we're
the
very
way.
cool.
Very
No,
cool.
the Pretty Informed Girls. The way that when I first saw your content interacted, it's like, oh, this is to reach like everyday people. Because we lost, as people who believe in human rights,
Right.
lost the average person that should be siding with us. We lost them. They think that progressives, Democrats are lame, are insufferable, and then you had the right wing who spews, and yet the far right wing is spewing it, especially to young men, and telling them things that don't help them at all, but it directs their anger um, towards someone and something. And we lost the average person. We became very insiders as Democrats, political insiders and elites. So, what is your? Because I like the way that you communicate. What is your style and tactics in relating to the average person who doesn't want to think about politics all the time, who, doesn't want to feel like, it's a Democrat, like I'm part of
Yeah,
this
yeah,
like
yeah.
group of nerds. How do you relate to people who are, are would think themselves as cool and have cool or hang out with their friends, but you can still make them care.
I think something really important is to have, and in general, I think we need this in this space. Like, it's not that like you have to be a political commentator or be a political activist or whatever your career is, politician, to make political content. And it's you can have political thoughts and believe in human rights and also have other interests and talk about them, and that's okay. I also think that I talk a lot about the polished nature of things. I want you to feel like I oftentimes don't have makeup on. I have my glasses on. I might be like in a tank top. I never look prim and proper because I don't want you to feel like we're in a different world. I want you to know that like I'm just your friend talking to you on FaceTime and like I'm a normal person with normal ideas that should be that should be very clear to people. And something that I hated when I would get on TikTok was like all these news anchors had to like have so much makeup on, and I'm like, this is ridiculous. Who has time for this when we're reporting the news? Like something's happening actively. I'm not gonna be like polished all the time. The word needs to get out. Who literally cares what you look like when you're trying to report on terrible things happening? That like I don't. So letting loose and letting go and making sure that people know that like we're just average people talking about this. I'm not someone special, you're not someone special. I'm just relaying the information to you in a way that I hope you can understand like we're having a glass of wine at dinner. And actually I lost my whole train of thought.
Well, I mean, you reminded me of another thought. You reminded me of another thought, which is what can on the Democratic side, what can be done better to support the ecosystem of everyday people who have, jobs, full-time jobs, but then they, create content or want to create content. I mean, there are people who, have very insightful knowledge and understanding of things. What could we do, or what could we learn to then counter from the right that they did so well, so that we're empowering our voices? Because I don't think it's just a given that the right wing is going to always dominate online.
Right. We have a polishing issue where we constantly feel like the right message has to be portrayed. And sometimes a message needs to be like a call to action needs to get out. And that's not just like in regards to breaking news, but like generally with campaigns, like there's just this giant idea that everything has to be perfect and so buttoned up and like with a bow on top. And that's not what the right does. They just throw it out into the ether and hope that shit sticks. And that is a problem because it spreads mass information, but like we don't need to be waiting on stuff so long. Also, the Democratic Party has a massive issue with listening to actual Democratic voters or people who are just on the left. Like when we all say, hey, we're progressive, or we criticize politicians, politicians are meant to be criticized. Does not mean I like I think you're the worst person in the world. It means that I have standards for you and you promised this and I'm going to hold you accountable to it because I know these are your values, and if you're not representing those values, I have a problem with that. Or you're also an elected official and you're representative of who I am. And if the people do not believe in what you're voting for, that's a problem because that's not representative of the people. And there's a huge problem with content creators and commentators, anyone in the left space, criticizing, pretty institutional Democrats or, more moderate takes. And that gets them like axed from anything. You don't get an opportunity to speak on anything forward, or they're not willing to hire you or not willing to have you talk to people. And that's a huge problem. We're not out to like get people. We're out to make things better, which is what the Democratic Party should want to do.
And disagreements only make the party stronger.
Yes.
And then we see what happens where you miss the voters. We miss where the voters are, which happened last year. I mean, there's so many factors. I mean, we don't have to go through every single possible reason why Democrats lost the election last year, but what we can see is this year what is working. Zoran is an example
Exactly.
of what is working, and it's just this raw authenticity and people sticking to their values, but also bringing people in.
Yes, being in groups that were never represented before.
So how do you also view when you're creating content, not just reaching people who agree or adjacent to or agreeing, how do you think about and how should we reach people who are independents, people who maybe are conservative,
Yeah.
who are MAGA, who are Republican? Yeah, how do you view reaching them? Because we can't win when we have a lot of groups that we don't engage in or engage with. And also there's like the question of young men just going more and more to the right. There is no guarantee that that's ever going to change unless there's a concerted effort to speak to people no matter their the way that they currently feel about issues.
So a huge part of what I try to do is make sure people don't feel dumb.
Yeah.
It makes people don't feel like we just think they're the worst person on earth. And there are some people who are racist and suck, and that is fact. There are other people who are maybe just not in a demographic that's been touched before. So Ron had a really great example of like this like 18-year-old kid or whoever who was like, I'm a registered Republican. I don't even know why. And I wanted to vote for you in the primary, but I couldn't because it's close primaries. Like that's a great example of there are people who you just don't know. And so speaking to them like they're stupid doesn't actually help. Or speaking to them like in really elitist terms isn't actually helpful either. And I think my goal is always to inform and educate. And I'm giving you the options of what I know to be true, and you can choose to believe that or not. There are some people who you're never going to reach, and that's okay. But knowing that I'm giving you the facts of what's happening and I want to form it to you in a way that shows like, hey, here's what this bill does and here's the actual effects on a long-term scale. It's why we do those call to actions like what the actual breaking down bills. Like I think some people just don't know. They have no idea. So it's like, okay, this is what it means and let me tell you what's going to happen 3 years from now. Factually, this is the chain of events. And then they go, "Oh, I don't actually agree with that." Well, yeah. So let's work backwards and figure out like how we can get around this. And it's a like give and pull relationship. It's not a I'm throwing something at you and telling you to go like fetch and
Like
figure it
telling you
out.
what to believe.
Yeah. I don't ever want someone, and I always emphasize this. I don't want someone to come to us and be like, I'm listening to your word as Bible. I do not want that. I want you to come here as a stop in your destination. You're learning something. It has inspired you to look into it more, whether it be books, another creator, another politician, a bill, whatever. Like everything is a stop and then look more. I think that people just need to look into things more and like actually start digging and researching. We've become quite lazy when it comes to wanting information and we want it handed to us, which is lovely. But I always want people to look further because there's 99% of the time something more than what meets the eye.
And thinking critically.
Thinking critically, huge
I'm
thing.
curious on your take on how we're seeing right now MAGA and there's a division right now because of the Epstein files, because you had that very flashy bunch of right-wing influencers getting the binders with redacted text, and then they were saying the same line, and now there's a lot of people, and I mean the American people, but especially it was very interesting is that you had in MAGA, so many people that were told that there would be the list would expose these people, and all of a sudden there's no list. All of a sudden there's more and more evidence that they're hiding something, and there seems to be some very strong cracks in the
There are.
coalition. And even though we disagree on so many fundamental things with many people who are supporting, who support the MAGA movement, seems like maybe there's something we can all agree with, that Epstein was a really bad guy, and anyone who was collaborating with him, whether it was the president or any president, should be held accountable.
I think the Epstein files are a great example of classes and that this is a movement of people versus an oligarchy. And no matter who you are, it doesn't matter if you are MAGA, Republic, like whatever you fit on the political spectrum, they don't care about you. And many rich politicians and rich people in the world don't care about you. And there's always this like, okay, well, what about Bill Clinton? I don't care about Bill Clinton. Sorry, said that publicly. Like, it doesn't matter. I'm not protecting someone. I'm not devout to someone on my own side. Because if you're a bad person, you're a bad person. I'm not going to deeply defend you for your actions. So when you actually start to like realize that these things are about the people versus the people in power, it's a lot easier to look at. And I think the Epstein Files is a great example of that. And they're also using women as like a bargaining chip when, we know that Les Wexner, we know that Prince Andrew, we know these people were like very prominent clients of Jeffrey Epstein, and nothing happened to them besides being shunned, I guess. Like nothing happened to them. So it's not about what what party you're in. Yeah. It is about the oligarchs versus the people, and I hope that can be where we start to like break party lines and understand what's actually like we actually are together, and these things affect us, not them.
And it's so all connected because you have the suppression of the Epstein files to protect the super rich and super powerful, and then we also have the big I call ugly bill that was the largest transfer of wealth from the working Americans to the ultra wealthy, kicking people off Medicaid, SNAP, food stamps. And we have to let people know is that Trump with is ultimately fake populism, because what he spoke to was of real anger that people have had since before, but the 2008 financial crisis, when none of these people were held accountable and so many people lost their homes and their jobs. And we need to let people know that this is the same exact protection of the elites and just empowering the super wealthy, because they want to make sure that they can still charge you fees when you're buying tickets or on your airplane. There's a new rule that was overturned for the airplane tickets that they don't have to refund you.
It's really eye-opening, and I think it will be the divide eventually. I don't know when. God, I hope soon. Yeah. But that will be where people start to look at things differently.
Immigration is, I think, a defining issue right now. How do you use your platform and intend to further use your platform as things are getting worse and worse? We have what happened in LA, in DC, the
coming to Chicago,
coming to Chicago and New York. I mean, it's going to play a critical role mobilizing people.
Yeah, it's really, on the ground work is really hard right now, because I think people don't even know where to start, which is why I remind everyone, like, build in your community and remember that just check in on your community and let them know, like, hey, I'm here for you. Or if you have a neighbor, let them know, like, I'm here. Let's make sure that we're checking on each other and everyone is holding, like, paying attention. Like, I want to make sure that my neighbor came home yesterday because I'm genuinely worried about it. Yeah. And when people are sitting outside of ICE detention centers, it takes literally a few people sitting outside of them protesting to scare, like, they're actually getting scared away because these people are losers. Like, truly, it is actually like such a loser thing to join ICE, to kidnap people based on race. Like, that is actually insane. And I don't think there's a world in which this doesn't have repercussions. Like, it will eventually in a few years from now, whatever we held these people accountable for. I ask people, like, implore people constantly to share things, like, share something to your story. You just don't know who it's going to reach. A lot of times, like, we'll get input that'll say, hey, this ICE van was spotted outside of whatever, the Walmart, like, on this corner, and we'll share it to our story, and then they'll share it to someone who lives right there. Like, every little bit counts, and you don't know who you're saving. If you speak another language, if you kind of speak another language, like mobilize that for yourself. Make sure you're reaching out to people. We need to ensure that everyone, especially after today, if anyone doesn't know, like it's now legal to racially profile people and kidnap them. And that is, the Supreme Court has ruled that legal. And it is so scary. So making sure someone knows that you're there for them, whether it be someone you don't even know, like we need to stop being shy about things, and we need to like put ourselves out there, because we're really past the point of doing nothing.
And as a creator, do you also feel that there's a huge value in someone who has a few hundred followers or just a
Yes.
few thousand followers and saying something?
Yes, I think someone who has 5 followers. I think no matter who you have, or if you don't share it to your story, like text your, text your friend. If you know someone that lives in that city, let them know. They might have an Instagram. Or like part of online activism, which is really, it's a convoluted topic, but I think through the mass information, what there is awareness. And awareness is what's so important when it comes to being online. Like, people just don't know what they don't know sometimes, and the media is quite slow. Like, they are. It's quite slow. Sometimes we get things faster because we work with, like, I work with actual activists on the ground. We might get information hours before outlets even report on it.
Yeah, and I think people really want to feel like whether they are very well known, have a big platform, or don't, that their voice does matter.
Yes.
And I mean, I do feel there's a difference between keyboard warriors and
Totally.
using your voice online
Totally.
to make an impact and educate people. So, one of the things I want to know is what gives you hope and strength while you're doing this work? You're constantly consuming the worst information of terrible things happening, but what keeps you going?
So this is interesting because my dad actually just told me to start talking about this more. So I'm glad you brought it up. I don't think this many people have ever, in at least like the recent generation's lifetimes, been this politically engaged since it's been like a requirement, like since there's been a draft. And everyone, like genuinely 10 years ago when I was in Young Democrats at my high school, or however long that was, 10 years ago, and other people like didn't know anything about politics, wanted nothing to do with it. And now it's like we've, for better or for worse, been forced into knowing what's happening, and it's allowing us to start to dismantle systems. We can't take apart systems and rebuild them without people being cognizant of them. And I think that so much of the American like infrastructure of government was just really unknown to people, and now they know what's going on, so we can actually start to get to the next step. And we couldn't do that with people just being like having such a blind eye to what's happening in the world. I also think there's a sense of community that I've never felt before, and every person that has so much hate in them, for that person there's like 10 times more people who have actual like love and values and want to help other people. And especially in this city, like I rarely meet people who I feel like don't align somewhere with wanting the human race to be better. And I don't think I felt that before. We've all kind of had this like looming like life over us, and now it's feeling like there's some hope for people.
What would you say is one misconception that people have about content creators that you would dispel?
I think it's a misconception, but also it can be true that everyone is online to, gain a following or just reporting things. And so many of the creators that I am close with were activists or were very integral to the justice system in some way or in politics, and that's why they are now creating content, because it's a necessity. And there's not a lot of people who just know about it. Like lawyers, like they need to be creating content so we know, because it's free. Like having that free information is really critical. So I think it's important for people to know that like there are some people who are really doing incredible work behind the scenes and are mobilizing, and that is something that's so important. Whether we get paid to do it or not, like, we might complain about it, but no one's gonna stop doing it.
Yeah, I think that many people think that creators are or some people are like influencers because it used to be like influencers. So it's good to know kind of just the calling that a lot of people have, that this is storytelling at the end of the day. And whether you're an organizer or whether you're running, you're an elected official, you're storytelling, you're trying to let people know, and this is just another medium of it. Last question before we wrap up. What keeps you optimistic about the younger generation, Gen Z, and politics?
Well, I'm Gen Z, so I'm also really optimistic about my generation and Gen Alpha. I think we're so loud, and we are very unapologetic as a generation, and there are many qualms of how we grew up and what we grew up with, but at the end of the day, like, I don't think we'll see people that are truly interested in enacting change in a way that we haven't seen in a while. Like, I think some generations get really, like, they're, like, debilitated by how bad everything is. We were really almost numb to it to a point where now it's like, all right, we're really mad. Like, we're going through, like, stages of grief, and I think that we're so, like, we feel like there's not a lot of hope for us sometimes, which is why we want to enact change so rapidly. Like, will our kids have a future if we have them? Is the planet, like, burning?
Can we ever afford
can
not
we
just
afford
a
a
house,
house?
a grocery? Can
Yeah.
can we afford our groceries? Yeah.
And that's a hard reality, but when you're hit with that, it does make you, like, pretty immediately have to rapid response. And so I think that us and then probably Gen Alpha will be really taking
Very
advantage of that.
entrepreneur, like
Yes,
our
super
generation.
entrepreneurial.
Yeah. And last thing, what is a call to action that you would let the audience know? What is one thing that you recommend to be able to disrupt what is going on?
Yes. Join a local organization. I literally don't care what it is. I don't care what you do for them. If it's show up once a week and be silent and feel like you're making community, if it's helping them run social media, if it's, handing food out once a week on a Sunday, like making food, if it's just sharing knowledge with people, join a mutual aid group, have mutual aid groups that join something in your community, and have a foundation that when change needs to be enacted locally, you can start there, because I promise you it will make everyone feel 10 times better when they are watching change actually enact in their community, because it's going to take a while to get it on a national scale, but all these things and all these laws are going to trickle down right to our communities, and we can only help ourselves. So help thy neighbor, truly.
Okay, thank you. Well, I hope everyone goes out and supports and follows Pretty Informed Girls.
Thank you.
Thank you, Meg.
Thanks
Appreciate
for
your
having
time.
me. Yeah.